I'll turn the floor to Dr. Newland to make the presentation from CNSC staff as outlined in CMD 15M22 and 15M22.8. Please proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the Commission. My name is Dr. David Newland, Acting Director General of the Directorate of Nuclear Cycle and Facilities Regulation. I am accompanied today by Ms. Corinne Glenn, the Director of the Waste and Decommissioning Division, Ms. Shona Draper, Regulatory Project Officer responsible for the Darlington Waste Management Facility, Ms. Lenora Makin, the Regulatory Project Officer for the Pickering Waste Management Facility, and Ms. Shirley Au, the Regulatory Project Officer for the Western Waste Management Facility. We are here today to present the Regulatory Oversight Report for the Ontario Power Generation's Waste Management Facilities for the reporting period from July 2010 to December 2014. Before we begin, for the record, I would like to correct an error in the CMD. In section 4.3 of CMD 15-M22, the value for OPG's consolidated financial guarantee should be $15.453 million, or $15.453 billion.
A small error, is it?
Yeah, exactly. We apologize for that. I will now pass the presentation to Ms. Glenn. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Corinne Glenn, and I am the Director of the Waste and Decommissioning Division at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. There are 4 classes of radioactive wastes in Canada. These are uranium mines and mills waste, low-level radioactive waste, intermediate-level radioactive waste, and high-level radioactive waste. We will not be discussing uranium mine and mill waste in this presentation because this type of waste is not generated by Ontario Power Generation and is therefore not managed at any of its 3 facilities. I will provide more information about the other 3 classes of waste later in this presentation. This map provides you with an overview of the facilities where radioactive waste is managed in Canada. Approximate overall inventories as of December 31st, 2013 were 383 million tons of uranium mine and mill waste, 2.4 million cubic meters of low-level waste, 35,000 cubic meters of intermediate-level radioactive waste, and over 2 million used fuel bundles, which constitute high-level radioactive waste. The responsibility for the safe management of waste rests with the waste owners, in this case, Ontario Power Generation, or OPG. The CNSC is responsible to ensure that the nuclear waste management facilities and the associated activities are safe and meet the applicable regulatory requirements. The CNSC accomplishes this through a robust compliance verification program, which includes on-site visits, inspections, follow-up activities, and desktop reviews. Designated inspectors verify compliance against the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, the associated regulations, and the license conditions using a risk-informed and performance-based approach. I will now provide an overview of the 3 waste management facilities owned and operated by OPG. These are the Darlington Waste Management Facility, located at the site of the Darlington Nuclear Generating Station, the Pickering Waste Management Facility, located at the site of the Pickering Nuclear Generating Stations, and the Western Waste Management Facility, located at the site of the Bruce Nuclear Generating Stations. Low-level radioactive waste is waste with radioactive content above exemption levels established in the regulations. Clearance levels and exemption quantities are low-risk activity levels specific for each isotope, below which radioactive material can be released unconditionally outside of regulatory control. Low-level radioactive waste does not generally require shielding and may require isolation and containment for up to a few hundred years. This waste can be further classified as processable, either through compaction or incineration, or as non-processable. Some examples of low-level waste include mop heads, paper towels, but also larger items such as steam generators from the refurbishment of the units at Bruce site, as shown on the picture on the right. All low-level waste from the Darlington, Pickering, and Bruce sites is safely stored after transport at the Western Waste Management Facility. CNSC requires all licensed facilities to implement waste management programs. OPG has implemented waste reduction and diversion programs at all its installations. In addition, waste generated in nuclear areas, but that is likely not contaminated, is segregated and later surveyed. If the waste is found to be clean or non-radioactive, the material can be unconditionally released for conventional disposal or recycling. CNSC staff review OPG's waste management programs as part of the regular oversight of all OPG nuclear facilities. Intermediate level radioactive waste has levels of radioactivity that warrant shielding during handling and storage, but typically generate little or no heat in the long term. This class of waste is not processed and includes such items as reactor components from refurbishment, as well as used filters and resins from the water filtration of used fuel pools. All intermediate level waste from the Darlington, Pickering, and Bruce stations is safely transported to the Western Waste Management Facility, where it is stored above ground or in in-ground containers, as shown in the photo on the right. The only exception is the intermediate level waste from the retubing of the Pickering A nuclear generating station, which is safely stored on site above ground at the Pickering Waste Management Facility, as shown in the photo on the left. High-level radioactive waste consists of used nuclear fuel, which is long-lived and requires shielding and long-term isolation. Used fuel is first stored in pools at the nuclear generating stations. After a cooling period of at least 10 years, the used fuel is then transferred to dry storage containers and moved to dedicated buildings at the waste management facility located next to the station where it was generated. Dry storage containers are freestanding containers constructed of steel and concrete that provide shielding for the radioactivity and allow for heat dissipation from the radioactive decay of the used fuel. These containers are also certified by the CNSC as part of transport containers for used nuclear fuel. NWMO, the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, through the adaptive phase management process, is implementing a long-term management solution for used fuel. CNSC oversight includes inspections, follow-ups, and desktop reviews. Over the reporting period, CNSC staff completed 20 inspections at the Darlington Waste Management Facility, 17 at the Pickering Waste Management Facility, and 16 at the Western Waste Management Facility. The performance rating methodology used in this report was established in 2010, and it's the same that is used for all other CNSC regulated facilities. It is based on multiple sources of input such as inspections, follow-ups, and desktop reviews. The rating of each safety control area integrates operational and technical information, and performance is assessed against safety objectives and criteria. For this oversight report, CNSC rated OPG's performance in all 14 safety and control areas as satisfactory or above for all 3 waste management facilities over the reporting period. 4 safety control areas were rated as fully satisfactory. These are operating performance, safety analysis, conventional health and safety, and security. Over the reporting period, no member of the public and no worker received a radiation dose over the regulatory limit of 1 millisievert per year and 50 millisievert per year, respectively. In fact, the dose to the public was consistently below 1% of the regulatory limit, while the dose to workers was consistently below 5% of the regulatory limit. The frequency and severity of conventional health and safety injuries to workers was minimal. There were no radiological releases to the environment above the license limits at any of the 3 facilities. And OPG complied with its license conditions with respect to Canada's international obligations. Overall, CNSC staff concluded that OPG operated the Darlington, Pickering, and Western waste management facilities safely. As mentioned previously, the regulatory oversight report was available to the public for written interventions for a period of 30 days from April 28th to May 28th, 2015, and notices of the meeting were sent to Aboriginal groups located in the surrounding area of the waste management facilities. 2 submissions were received, and both were in support of CNSC staff's conclusion that OPG continues to operate its waste management facilities safely in accordance with the Nuclear Safety and Control Act and its associated regulations. CNSC requires that all major facilities maintain a public information program and disclosure protocol. OPG implemented a program that was reviewed by CNSC staff, who concluded that this program meets all the requirements of CNSC document RDGD 99.3. Under this program, OPG reports significant events to the public, documents and responds to public concerns and inquiries. OPG also maintains a website and is active on several social media platforms such as YouTube and Twitter. Following the Fukushima Daiichi incident, the CNSC developed an action plan. In addition to requiring a review of the safety cases for the nuclear generating stations, including used fuel pools, CNSC also directed OPG to re-examine its safety cases for the waste management facilities. This review did not discover any significant issues, but OPG did identify additional improvements and enhancements, such as purchasing satellite phones for all its facilities. CNSC staff have reviewed and are satisfied with OPG's implementation of these improvements to date. CNSC staff will continue to incorporate operational experience and lessons learned of events at other facilities worldwide into its regulatory oversight of waste facilities in Canada. As per the Fukushima Action Plan, licensees were requested to complete an analysis of the structural integrity of the used fuel pools. CNSC found that the structural integrity analysis of used fuel pools at Canadian nuclear generating stations was acceptable. The analysis predicted some leakage at elevated temperatures. However, this is well within the makeup capability that has been implemented and thus ensuring fuel cooling is maintained during an accident. Furthermore, dry storage containers have been confirmed to withstand an extreme event. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, low and intermediate radioactive waste is routinely and safely transported from the Darlington and Pickering sites to the Western Waste Management Facility in packages that meet the CNSC regulatory requirements. In addition, used fuel and dry storage containers is transferred from the nuclear generating stations to the dedicated fuel storage facilities at the adjacent waste management facility using a specially designed vehicle called the Lift King, as shown in the picture on the slide. Annually, hundreds of shipments of radioactive materials safely take place from the nuclear generating stations. CNSC concluded that OPG's packaging and transport of waste is safe. I will now pass the presentation over to Ms. Shona Draper.
Thank you and good afternoon. For the record, my name is Shona Draper and I work as a project officer within the Waste and Decommissioning Division at the CNSC. I am the regulatory program officer responsible for the Darlington Waste Management Facility. The Darlington Waste Management Facility is located adjacent to the Darlington Nuclear Generating Station on the north shore of Lake Ontario. Approximately 14% of OPG's radioactive waste is stored at this facility. Currently, the only class of radioactive waste stored at the Darlington Waste Management Facility is high-level waste. The figure shown on this slide is an aerial view of the Darlington site. The Commission approved the operation of the Darlington Waste Management Facility in December 2007. The facility is contained within its own protected area and currently consists of one processing building and one high-level waste storage building. A second storage building for high-level waste and a storage building for intermediate-level waste are currently under construction. The Darlington Waste Management Facility loaded and stored its first dry storage container in 2008. Therefore, the oldest container stored at this facility is 7 years old. The service life of a dry storage container is 50 years. The current storage design capacity of this facility is 483 containers. When the second storage building for high-level waste becomes operational, the storage design capacity of the facility will be 983 containers. As of June 12, 2015, 396 containers were stored at the Darlington Waste Management Facility. Each year, approximately 60 containers are processed and stored at this facility. With the current storage design capacity of 483 containers, the facility could process and store approximately an additional 1.5 years' worth of containers without further construction. With the future storage design capacity of 983 containers after the second storage building for high-level waste becomes operational, the facility could process and store approximately an additional 10 years' worth of containers without further construction. Following public proceedings, the Commission issued a 10-year renewal for the Darlington Waste Management Facility license from March 13, 2013 to April 30, 2023. This license utilizes standardized license conditions. As a companion to the license, CNSC staff issued a license condition handbook for this facility in March 2013. OPG reported 6 minor events to CNSC staff that occurred during the reporting period at the Darlington Waste Management Facility, averaging approximately 1 event per year. These consisted of 2 events related to fire protection and 4 events related to security. The first fire protection event occurred in the first quarter of 2011 and was an unplanned loss of fire water supply. The second occurred in the third quarter of 2013, where the fire panel for the Darlington site was in bypass mode for the Darlington Waste Management Facility. After the review of these events, CNSC staff concluded that no adverse effects on the health and safety of workers, the public, or the environment resulted from these events, and that OPG's actions in response to the events was acceptable. All events are now closed. CNSC staff rated the radiation protection, safety, and control area for the Darlington Waste Management Facility as satisfactory for the entire reporting period. Annual dose to the public at the boundary of the Darlington site which includes the annual dose to the public attributed to the nuclear generating station and the waste management facility, was consistently more than 1,000 times below the regulatory limit of 1 millisievert per year throughout the reporting period. Since workers are monitored individually, dose information is available for OPG personnel working at the Darlington Waste Management Facility. Throughout the reporting period, the average annual dose to workers was 0.3 millisieverts or less, and the maximum annual dose to workers was 1.7 millisieverts or less, well below the regulatory limit of 50 millisieverts per year, not to exceed 100 millisieverts over 5 years. With respect to conventional health and safety, no incidents were reported to the CNSC during the reporting period for the Darlington Waste Management Facility. CNSC staff rated the conventional health and safety and control area as satisfactory for 2010 and fully satisfactory for the remainder of the reporting period. CNSC staff rated the environmental protection, safety and control area for the Darlington Waste Management Facility as satisfactory for the entire reporting period. Please note that there was a typo on this slide that has been corrected for today's presentation. The units for the particulate derived release limit and action level should be becquerel per year as seen on this slide, not becquerel per liter. OPG monitors controlled airborne emissions from the Darlington Waste Management Facility through weekly samples of the processing building stack. Airborne emissions from this facility are bounded using the derived release limits that were developed for the Darlington site. Action levels for airborne emissions were also developed for the Darlington site. Both limits can be seen on this slide. Throughout the reporting period, OPG took over 230 samples of the processing building stack and found detectable amounts of gross beta gamma in only one sample. All of the stack samples taken were below the minimum detectable activity. The stack sample that had detectable amounts of gross beta gamma had a reading of 1.3 times 10 to the 3 becquerel, which is only slightly above the minimum detectable activity and is a small fraction of a % of the action level. OPG monitors controlled liquid releases from the Darlington Waste Management Facility through stormwater samples that are taken on a weekly basis. Similarly to airborne emissions, liquid releases from this facility are bounded using the derived release limits that were developed for the Darlington site. The derived release limits for gross beta gamma and tritium can be seen on this slide. Action levels for liquid releases were also developed for the Darlington site as shown on this slide. Throughout the reporting period, OPG took over 230 stormwater samples that were all well below the action levels and also consistently below 37 becquerels per liter for gross beta gamma and 1,850 becquerels per liter for tritium. In comparison, the drinking water standard for tritium is 7,000 becquerels per liter. The Darlington Waste Management Facility license authorizes OPG to construct 3 additional storage buildings for high-level waste and 1 storage building for intermediate-level waste. Currently, OPG is constructing 1 storage building for high-level waste and the storage building for intermediate-level waste. Before construction began for these buildings, an environmental management plan, a construction verification plan, and project design requirements were submitted by OPG to CNSC staff for review and acceptance. Before operation begins, a commissioning report for each building will need to be reviewed and accepted by CNSC staff. I will now pass the presentation over to Ms. Lenora Macon.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Lenora Macon. I'm a project officer with the Waste and Decommissioning Division at the CNSC. I'm the regulatory project officer responsible for the Pickering Waste Management Facility. As previously mentioned, the Pickering Waste Management Facility is located adjacent to the Pickering nuclear generating stations on the north shore of Lake Ontario. Approximately 32% of OPG's radioactive waste is currently stored at the facility. Almost all of this waste is used nuclear fuel, and the remaining small portion is intermediate level waste, resulting from the retubing of the Pickering A nuclear generating station. The photo on this slide shows an aerial view of the Pickering site. The waste management facility was planned in 2 phases. Phase 1 became operational in January 1996 and is located within the nuclear generating station's protected area, as shown on the right of the image. Phase 1 consists of the processing building, storage buildings 1 and 2 that have design capacities of 187 and 469 dry storage containers respectively, and the retube component storage area for the interim storage of intermediate level waste from the retubing. With the exception of periodic inspections, monitoring, and maintenance, there have been no operational activities in the retube component storage area since 1993. Phase 2 is located within its own protected area on the Pickering property site, as indicated by the dashed lines on the top left of the image. Phase 2 consists of storage building number 3, which was constructed in 2009 and has a capacity of 500 dry storage containers. During the license period, OPG plans to construct a 4th storage building for used fuel dry storage within the Phase 2 area. The Pickering Waste Management Facility loaded and stored its first dry storage container in 1996. Therefore, the oldest container stored at the facility is 19 years old. The current storage design capacity of this facility is 1,154 containers. When the 4th storage building becomes operational, the storage design capacity of the facility will be approximately 1,800 containers. As of June 12, 2015, 760 containers were stored at the Pickering Waste Management Facility. Each year, approximately 50 containers are processed and stored at this facility. With a current storage capacity of 1,154 containers, the facility could process and store approximately an additional 7 years' worth of containers without further construction. With the future storage capacity of approximately 1,800 containers after storage building number 4 becomes operational, the facility could process and store approximately 19 years' worth of containers without further construction. A renewal for the Pickering Waste Management Facility license was issued by the Commission for a 10-year period on April 1st, 2008, with an expiry of March 31st, 2018. In December 2012, the license was amended to include OPG's revised preliminary decommissioning plan. The preliminary decommissioning plan was updated following its required 5-year review by OPG. By the end of 2016, CNSC staff will restructure the Pickering Waste Management Facility operating license to the new format to incorporate standardized license conditions and will issue a license condition handbook. During the reporting period, OPG reported 6 minor events to the CNSC that occurred at the Pickering Waste Management Facility, averaging approximately 1 per year. These consisted of 2 security-related events, 1 pressure boundary code noncompliance, 1 instance of environmental samples not being completed as per the scheduled frequency, a snow removal vehicle not being monitored as per OPG's procedures, and a change in monitoring sampling frequency without consulting the licensing basis documentation. After the review of these events, CNSC staff concluded there were no adverse effects on the health and safety of workers, the public, or the environment resulting from these events, and that OPG's actions in response to the events are acceptable. All events are now closed. CNSC staff rated the radiation protection, safety, and control area at the Pickering Waste Management Facility as satisfactory over the reporting period. Annual dose to the public at the boundary of the Pickering site, which includes annual dose to the public attributed to the nuclear generating station and the waste management facility, was consistently significantly below the regulatory limit of 1 millisievert per year throughout the reporting period. Since workers are monitored individually, dose information is available for OPG personnel working at the Pickering Waste Management Facility. Throughout the reporting period, an average annual dose to workers was 0.2 millisieverts or less, and the maximum annual dose to a worker was 1.3 millisieverts or less. As well, well below the regulatory limit of 50 millisieverts per year, not to exceed 100 millisieverts over 5 years. With respect to conventional health and safety, no incidences were reported to the CNSC at the Pickering Waste Management Facility. CNSC staff rated the safety and control area as satisfactory for 2010 and fully satisfactory for the remainder of the reporting period. CNSC staff rated the environmental protection, safety, and control area as satisfactory for the entire reporting period. OPG monitors controlled airborne emissions from the Pickering Waste Management Facility through weekly samples of the processing building stack. Airborne emissions from this facility are bounded using the derived release limits that were developed for the Pickering site. Action levels for airborne emissions were also developed for the Pickering site. Both can be seen on this slide. Throughout the reporting period, OPG took over 230 samples of the processing building stack and found detectable amounts of gross beta gamma in only 5 samples. All other samples taken were below the minimum detectable activity. The stack sample that had the highest detectable amount of gross beta gamma had a reading of 7.8 times 10 to the 3 becquerel, which is only a small fraction of a percent of the action level. Active liquid waste from the Pickering Waste Management Facility is not directly released to the environment, but pumped to the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station's active liquid waste system. Through quarterly operation report, OPG provides information on the active liquid waste that is pumped from the waste management facility to the nuclear generating station, including the volume of the waste pumped and the tritium and gross beta gamma activities. Over the reporting period, active liquid waste from pumped to the nuclear generating stations remains within the license limits. The direct releases to the environment are controlled by the station. Phase 2 of the waste management facility, which comprises of Storage Building 3, has its own groundwater monitoring program. As part of this program, samples taken by OPG on a quarterly basis were consistently well below the action level of 3.0 times 10 to the 11 becquerel per year over the reporting period. The current license for the Pickering Waste Management Facility authorizes the construction of 1 additional storage building for dry storage containers. In addition to this, OPG plans to replace the current processing building with a new processing building, which will enhance productivity. CNSC staff are anticipating a license amendment request by the end of this year in this regard. I will now pass the presentation over to Ms. Shirley Au.
Thank you and good evening. My name is Shirley Au, and I'm a Senior Project Officer in the Waste and Decommissioning Division at CNSC. I'm also the Regulatory Program Officer responsible for the Western Waste Management Facility. The Western Waste Management Facility is located at the site of the Bruce Nuclear Generating Stations on the east shore of Lake Huron. All of the waste generated at the nuclear generating stations operated by Bruce Power is sent to OPG's Western Waste Management Facility for processing and storage. In addition, low and intermediate waste from both the Pickering and Darlington sites are sent to Western for processing and storage. Approximately 54% of OPG's waste is stored at the Western Waste Management Facility. This slide shows an aerial view of the Western Waste Management Facility. This figure is a correction to the one in CMD 15M22. The protected area for the Western Used Fuel Dry Storage Facility is bounded by the dashed line. The Western Waste Facility contains storage buildings for low-level waste, intermediate level waste, and used fuel, as well as other processing buildings, such as the Waste Volume Reduction Building. The low and intermediate level waste storage area has been receiving waste since 1974 and has a storage capacity of up to 120,000 cubic meters. The current inventory of low and intermediate level waste is 98,132 cubic meters. Therefore, based on a volume of 2,640 cubic meters received per year, and this is based on the average of waste volume received over the past 5 years, this waste storage area has approximately 8 years to reach the design capacity for low and intermediate level waste. The Western license was amended in 2002, and OPG constructed storage buildings for dry storage containers for used fuel. The Western facility loaded and stored its first dry storage container in 2003. Therefore, the oldest container stored at this facility is 12 years old. The life design of a dry storage container is 50 years. The current design capacity of this facility is 2,000 dry storage containers. The current inventory is 1,038 containers. Each year, approximately 130 containers are processed and stored at Western. With the current capacity, the facility could process and store approximately an additional 7.5 years of containers. A renewal of the Western Waste Management Facility license was issued by the Commission for a 10-year period from June 1st, 2007 to May 31st, 2017. The Commission further amended the Western license with a revised decommissioning plan and associated financial guarantee on December 19, 2012. By the end of 2016, CNSC staff will restructure the Western Waste Management Facility operating license to the new format. The new format will incorporate standard license conditions and have a companion license conditions handbook. Reportable events. During the last 5 years, OPG reported 21 minor events at the Western Waste Management Facility to the CNSC, averaging approximately 4 events per year. These consisted of events in the following areas, and I will give an example of each. 9 were related to emergency management and fire protection, specifically 3 in emergency management and 6 in fire protection. For emergency management, in one case, the public address system loudspeaker volume was manually lowered. An example of a fire protection event is a fire detection impairment that caused by presence of objects in the beam path. 3 events were related to radiation protection. As an example, there was a reverse airflow from the incinerator room and waste processing room, which is Zone 3, to the amenities building hallway in Zone 2. 3 were related to safeguards. One example is the failure of Safeguard's remote monitoring equipment. 3 events were related to operating performance. In one case, picketing during a legal strike disrupted staff arrival and departure for 4 hours. 2 events were related to physical design and specifically in pressure boundary, one which involved an overdue relief valve replacements, and the other involved undersized relief valve, and there was 1 security event. CNSC concluded that no adverse effects on the health and safety of persons or the environment resulted from these events, and that OPG's actions in response to the events were acceptable. All events are closed. CNSC staff rated the radiation protection safety and control area at the Western Waste Management Facility as satisfactory for the entire reporting period. Annual dose to the public at the boundary of the Western site, which includes the annual dose to the public attributed to the Bruce Nuclear Generating Stations and the Western Waste Management Facility, was consistently more than 100 times below the regulatory limit of 1 millisievert per year throughout the reporting period. Effective dose. Please note there was a typo in the previous version of this slide, which has been corrected for today's presentation by removing the word average in the title. Workers at Western are monitored individually. Therefore, dose information is available for personnel at the waste management facility. For the reporting period, the average annual dose to workers was 0.1 millisievert or less, and the maximum annual dose to workers was 1.8 millisieverts or less, below the regulatory limit of 50 millisieverts per year, not to exceed 100 millisieverts over 5 years. Over the reporting period, OPG reported 2 minor conventional health and safety related incidents at Western. Excuse me. In the first case, an employee was struck by a pallet frame. This was not a medically treated injury, but associated work was halted by OPG for further investigation and assessment to minimize reoccurrence. In the second incident, an employee was exposed to a weld arc resulting in eye irritation that required medical treatment. Following medical treatment, the employee was able to return to work immediately. To prevent reoccurrence, OPG has since revised work procedures and signage. Both incidents are closed. CNSC staff rated conventional health and safety as satisfactory for 2010 and as fully satisfactory for the remainder of the reporting period. With respect to environmental protection, CNSC staff rated OPG's performance at the Western Waste Management Facility as satisfactory for the entire reporting period. Different from the Darlington and Pickering waste management facilities, Western has its own facility-specific derived release limits and active levels for airborne releases. Additionally, Western has samples taken on a weekly basis for carbon-14 and iodine-131. During the reporting period, airborne releases were consistently below the action levels and consistently below 1% of the derived release limits. Western's more extensive monitoring program can be attributed to the fact that it is the only OPG waste management facility at where processing of waste, such as incineration and compaction, takes place. This slide depicts airborne releases as a percentage of the derived release limit for the 4 main substances being monitored at Western. As for airborne limits, Western has its own facility-specific derived release limits and action levels for controlled liquid releases. OPG monitors waterborne effluent leaving Western at 6 sample stations on a weekly basis and analyzes for tritium and gross beta activity. The results of the individual sample stations are then combined and reported as a total monthly emission. There were 54 monthly emissions over the reporting period, which were compared to the monthly action levels and derived release limits. 6 of the 54 samples were above the action limits for gross beta, 3 in 2011 and 3 in 2012. In each instance, however, the action levels remained below 0.03% of the annual derived release limit. As a result of the exceedances, OPG conducted an investigation and identified the need to reassess the action levels using operating experience to ensure that they reflect the operating practices at the Western facility. The action levels at Western were subsequently updated in 2013 to better reflect site boundaries and conditions. Since updating the action levels, samples of controlled liquid releases have been consistently below these levels. This slide shows the liquid effluent releases as a percentage of the derived release limit. Groundwater protection. OPG has 20 groundwater monitoring wells at and around the Western facility. All wells are sampled quarterly for tritium and gross beta, except for water sample hole, or WSH-231, which is sampled every 2 weeks. Tritium concentrations in monitoring wells have been very low, except at WSH-231, which has shown elevated tritium concentrations since the late 1990s. This monitoring well was installed in the Middle Sand Aquifer and located adjacent to several low-level storage buildings. In 2010, OPG determined the cause of the anomaly to be air and/or vapor transferred from inside the low-level storage buildings through the electrical cable ducts into the electrical manhole. After OPG implemented the corrective measures in 2011, results at WSH 231 have indicated a declining trend. CNSC staff continues to review the results of this monitoring well, in addition to other monitoring results, to ensure the safety of OPG's operations. This figure shows, since 2011, tritium concentrations at the monitoring well 231 to be slowly declining. Specifically, the average concentration steadily dropped from 48,800 becquerels per liter in 2011 to 34,000 becquerels per liter in 2014. The red line is a curve-fitting trend. OPG continues to monitor this trend to verify the effectiveness of the corrective actions. Additionally, CNSC staff continues to review the results of monitoring well 231 to ensure the safety of OPG's operations. Major future projects and initiatives. Please note there was an error on this slide that was provided previously. The last bullet from that slide has been removed for today's presentation. During the reporting period, OPG has constructed 3 storage buildings for low-level waste, 54 in-ground storage containers for intermediate-level waste, and 2 storage buildings for dry storage containers. All of these additional structures are authorized by the current license. I will now pass the presentation to Dr. Newland.
Thank you. I will now conclude our presentation with a few highlights from the Oversight Report. Over the reporting period from July 2010 to December 2014, CNSC staff have reviewed OPG's performance at its waste management facilities and have concluded that no member of the public or worker received a radiation dose over the regulatory limit. The frequency and severity of conventional health and safety injuries to workers was minimal. There were no radiological releases to the environment above the regulatory limits at any of the 3 facilities, and OPG complied with the Nuclear Safety and Control Act, the regulations, and their license conditions. Thank you. That concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you.